Hi, this is a chain tutorial for Archimatix in Unity, and of course the information I give you here is also going to work on wires and cables and ropes, but we're going to do a chain because it's really easy to see how everything, how the shape is flowing across the deformer. First of all, I'm not going to be huge like this. Let me shrink down. And I'm going to show you really quickly what we're going to cover in this tutorial. So we're going to make a chain, a metal chain, and then I'm just going to deform it around some normal shapes. Like we're going to use a pretty normal curve. I'm going to show you how to make it look like the chain wraps around a shape in your scene, and then I'll show you also how we can deform a chain in more than one plane. So in this one, I'm deforming the chain in both the vertical and horizontal directions to give it a little more oomph. I'm going to build these models from scratch. So let me just hide this, and I'm going to go into Archimatix and create a new model. We're going to do this in real time, so if you want to try to follow along, that's great. I'll try to go fast, so if you're just watching the video, you can pick up the tips. I'm going to build my chain link, just one chain link, with a circle and a rounded rectangle, and these are going to be joined with a plan sweep. So the circle will be my section. Rounded rectangle will be the plan, and let's just get this looking like a chain link first of all. All right, that looks fine. I'm also going to set the model to use the gold shader that comes with Archimatix, just to make it a little easier to see. I'm also going to remove the top cap and the bottom cap from my plan sweep. So far so good, right? Now we're going to send this shape down a linear repeater, and I'm just going to connect it to the node mesh. Linear repeater has a breakout controller called a repeater tool, and inside the three important controls are the size. Let me zoom out just a bit. The size, which is the overall length of the repeated, the full length of the repeated shape. It's the bay, which is the distance between the pieces. And then there's a third control, cells, which is the actual number of links that are going to end up in our chain. And as you can see, you can load any of these. Say if you expose these parameters, you can load any of them, but there is an order of sequence that has to happen here. So just so you're aware, play around with it, it'll make more sense. It flows from top to bottom. Now I need to go ahead and create the connecting links. And there's two ways to do this. What I like to do is create an instance and connect it to the cell shape, but I did realize there's maybe an easier way to do it. So I'm just going to hop into the controls, and if I include an incremental rotation of 90 degrees, that means that each repetition is going to spin 90 degrees on my x-axis. So basically I've got a chain like that. And what I would normally do is probably not use a perfect 90. I would send it a little bit off so that the chain will, you know, gradually twist as it goes around. Now, for some reason, I don't know, I just decided that I kind of would rather I kind of would rather just make an instance of my chain link, and then I would flip that I would flip this instance 90 degrees, and then I will load it in as the cell mesh. And why don't I see you? Oh, because I translated 90. Yeah, it's not very useful if I'm not careful about which parameter I'm controlling here. Then I'm going to adjust my bay. Yep, that looks fine. And I'm still going to go in and give it that slight incremental rotation. But now it's just a matter of a few degrees, just so it doesn't quite repeat all the way from the beginning to end. Now you see we're kind of dipping down through my floor plane. That's okay, because the whole reason that we're doing this is to use a plan deformer to take this linear chain and convert it into the shapes for our scene. Now I'm going to take just a second here to plug the community website, because some of the shapes that I'm using I've downloaded. Well, I didn't download them, I created them. So go to community.archimatix.com and go to AX Share 2D Shapes and Nodes. Some of the shapes I'm using in this tutorial are the sine wave and sine wave ramp shapes. I think I'm also using the Cavetto. Okay, now obviously you don't have to download these shapes. You can also follow along with the free curve if you want, or use any of the shapes included with Archimatix. So first what I'm going to do is just add my Cavetto ramp and a plan deformer. I'm going to take the output of my linear repeater, and that's going to be my input mesh. I'm going to take the Cavetto ramp, and that's going to be my plan. Now, I showed this in a previous tutorial, but I'll just say it again here. What happens when you use the plan deformer is your shape will continue on past the plan in both directions. It really doesn't it doesn't discriminate, and it's not really aware of the plan. One of the things that I want to fix, though, on my model is when I adjust the size of my linear repeater, it grows from the center. So this is a symmetric node, but I want it to grow from one end, and the way to do that is to come into the transform on my linear repeater and set that X translation. And as you can see, I can just slide it along the path. But what I want is the origin to always be in the same place. So there's a pretty simple relation. Let me just show, where is my, okay, here is the, actually, let me disconnect this to show you this. Well, look, I'm not going to be fancy. I'm just going to make a relation between the size of my linear repeater and its X translation. And that relation needs to be 2 to 1. So whatever is in size, I want half of that to be in the translation. So I'm just going to add a little bit of math. I'm going to divide by 2, and I don't want it to feed back, so I'm just going to delete and save. Now when I adjust the size of my chain, it grows from one direction. All right, now when I connect the linear repeater back into the plan deformer, all right, my plan deformer is very small, and I just want this chain to have kind of a natural kind of looking hang. So I'm going to realign my deformer. I'm going to do it like, okay, this is a little better. Maybe you're better off with Freaker. This is why I always say that you should be making your own nodes, your own shape nodes, because every model that you create, you'll want to control in a slightly different way. This one, apparently I'm growing from the top down. So let's just extend my chain. And why are you going through the floor? Now, because my chain continues off into infinity, you see I get a curve that just keeps kind of keeps going on in the last direction that it pointed. So let me just trim up my chain. All right. Now I know what you're thinking. Wouldn't it be cool to be able to control this with physics? It's not gonna work. I tried. I tried. This is a lot easier. We're just gonna fake our physics. So what I have is like fake gravity, and let's just say that the chain is attached here to some sort of platform. Chain is attached here at the ceiling. And you know, before I did this tutorial, I went on ArtStation, and I was like, you know, I'm gonna grab some inspiration art to see what people are doing with chains in their 3D art. And I'm sure there's like a lot of you know, environments, like fantasy environments with chains. No, I guess not. Maybe chains are too hard, so people just don't do them. Or maybe chains are out of fashion. I don't really think that's true. Who knows? All right, I'm going to make another model. This is the one that's going to wrap around a post. Now this time I'm just going to use for my deformer path a circle. Archimatix's favorite sweetheart. Just the circle node. So instead of this Cavetto ramp, just going to plug in. Come on. Plug in this circle. And let me pull you up here. Now what's happened? Our entire chain is wrapping around the circle, but if you look close, you can see there's more than one set of geometry. So our chain is wrapping around and around and around and around and around. So as long as our chain is, it will just keep going around the circular path. Now we can edit the path, and you see the chain will only go as long as the linear repeater tells it to. So I'm just going to make it look like an endless chain. What should we do? How many links? Yeah, that's probably close enough for me not to annoy you. Okay, endless chain. Now, obviously, it's not really an endless chain. It's still my linear repeater. I've just moved the end so that it, links back across the beginning. If you have one too many links and it's not linking up, there's a control for that. Here on the linear repeater, there is a control. We can do the first node, and you can selectively do the last node, so if you need something special to connect those up again. But this isn't what we want. We want the chain to wrap around and around and around this shape like several times. Like it's a scene environment. I don't want an endless chain. I want a chain wrap, and I want to see it. It's pretty easy, although not super intuitive. We've got to go back to our linear repeater. Go to the transform, and it's going to be one of these rotations. I'm never sure quite which one it is. I think it's rotate Z. But, honestly, every time I just kind of have to guess. Let me give an angle on this. And you see, yes, I was correct. It's rotation Z. Let me just fill in with like a rotation of, say, 4 degrees. And we can see the chain is still going around that circle, endlessly around the circle. Well, it's not endless. It's only as long as the chain is. But because I've kicked it off on an angle, it's going to spin around that chain. Spin around that circle and keep continuing up along that angle. Okay, the third thing that I want to show you is I'm going to take this chain and I'm going to deform it one more time. This time I'm going to use my sine wave ramp, downloaded from the Community Archimatix website. And I'm going to go ahead and shift it into the Y plane. So this is skittering back and forth across our surface. And as you see, my sine wave ramp, if the chain goes on, if it's not long enough, the chain just continues on to infinity. So I'm just going to drag my sine wave ramp out. I have a few other controls on this ramp node. I'm going to just do something simple like that. Hey, look at that. That's not bad. All right, so you see that as long as the chain is very close to the path, the plan, the deformation looks pretty good. If you get in here real close, you can see that some of these vertices are bent a little funny. So, you know, this is not perfect. You got to use your imagination, and you got to hide the flaws. All right, but what I really want to show you with this shape is we're going to deform it again on another axis. So let me grab another plan deformer. And another shape. And this time I'm going to use a Bezier node that I've made. Basically just exposes a simple Bezier command in TurtleScript, but then I added some scene handles so that I can, you know, play around with it. So I'm going to, whoops. I'm going to connect the deformer mesh into another deformer. Now, let's take a look at this real quick before I set it up the way that I intended. I have now two deformers, and they're both in the same plane. They're both, you know, in the Y plane, and it's not really a plane. It's actually the XZ plane, but it's along the Y axis. And you're gonna see like some of this deform on deform gets a little ugly. The further it moves away from my original plan, the worse the chain gets. So you can do this, but I think you need to be subtle about it. Now, I think a better way to do this double plan is to do it in two different axes. So I'm going to have a I'm gonna just keep kind of fiddling around until I find it. Is that it? Now I may have to, since my original deformer is now being deformed through another node, I might have to change its axis. And there's nothing genius here. I just kind of have to play around till I get it. Okay, so that looks like it. Now, as you can see, or maybe you can't see, the sine wave ramp is horizontal, and my Bezier ramp is vertical, and there's a much easier way to take a look at this. Here is my second deformer. And this is just the scene handles in my Bezier ramp. And if I look down from above, here is the sine wave deformer. Now, hopefully you can follow along what's going here. If you go to the orthographic scene mode, what I'm going to do is sort of flatten out this. Now you can see how well it's conforming to the shape, okay? The first deformer sets a shape in the horizontal axis. And as you see, it follows the plan really neatly. Now, I'm going to go into the second shape. And honestly, I think I'm doing this backwards, so I'm just going to flip it around. Here is my second deformer. Just going to play with these scene handles. And you can get pretty elaborate. These can even loop. These can double back on themselves. Now, what you're not seeing, now this is doubling back on itself. What you're not seeing is now from the top, it's a little hard to understand how this curve becomes this shape. So if you're doing this, if you're playing this around and it just becomes like a strange deformed salad, go into your orthographic scene view and, you know, just do this really cleanly on a vertical plane and horizontal plane. You will be able to figure out how this is working, okay? I'm not gonna go too elaborate here. As you can see, the deformer handles this pretty cleanly, not perfectly, but pretty good. All right, now we're going to go into the advanced class. I hope you stuck around because this is going to be really useful to everyone who's using Archimatix. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to know about this shape. When I deformed it with a plan deformer, this is no longer individual little shapes in the scene hierarchy. When you take a look at this, the generated game objects, I only have this plan deformer. I don't have all of those little links. I cannot select all the little links in the scene. I just have one big scene object. What that does is, let's just kind of play around here. If you want to do physics, you know, so your characters can trip over this chain, there's a limit to mesh colliders. And when you hit it, the shape just won't give you a mesh collider. It will switch automatically to a convex mesh. Just be aware of it. The other issue is, now I can geometrically make these chains choke Unity, okay? by sending this up really high. Now I'm just making a ridiculously long chain. Let's say it's 100 meters long. And I'm doing this deliberately because what you will find, and you've probably seen this error before, is the shape breaks and you end up with some, you know what, I don't think it actually broke. I'm going to send it even higher. Okay, now you can kind of see the break, and I'm almost positive you've seen this before in your own models. When you've sent something, you've probably seen it in the plan sweep. When you get too many vertices, Archimatix will fail, and as far as I understand it, this is actually Unity failing. And there's no error, so you won't know that it failed, but it's actually a really predictable fail. And what ends up happening is your shape just stops creating, and the last vertex just creates a skinny little vertex all the way back to its origin point. It looks like the, you know, your lovely plan got truncated, and it's cutting off the shape, like it's automatically closing the shape. That's a predictable error, and that error is described here in your vertices. This is a Unity issue that has to do with 16-bit. When you have more than, there's a specific number, I think it's 65,535 vertices, something like that. It's one of these like binary numbers, and it is very predictable. Once you cross that threshold, your model's going to break. How do you get around that? Well, just don't cross that threshold. You see, now I don't have, even though my chain goes off into how far, 100 meters into the distance, I don't get that strange error. If I cross that vertex threshold, it's a specific number. See how it comes back? One more time. Still crossing that 65K threshold. One more time. And we're under the threshold. You could sit there and play with Archimatix, and you can make it break. Now the model, if you go into the code, the model will tell you how many vertices. So you could, you could set up like a scripted limit, but as far as I can tell, Archimatix does not give you an error. But this is so predictable. If you ever have a single mesh that has more than 65,535 vertices, it will break. Well, how do I get around that? Let's go back to one that deliberately breaks. Oops. That was higher than I expected. Okay. Now, predictable break. Right? How can I keep my plan shape? There's a fix. You probably know what it is. Reduce the segments. Everything's geometric. If I reduce these segments from 16 to 8, yeah, my model is half as many vertices. Still crossing that threshold. Let's reduce the segs on my original plan shape. I didn't plan this in advance, but as long as we can get under that 65K, yeah, we get the shape. Okay. Okay, I think that's about it for this chain tutorial. And once again, I think you can, you can apply these to your scenes. It might be a good idea to stamp this geometry. Just be aware it is one big piece, not a lot of individual pieces once you send it through the deformer. And, I strongly caution you, do not try to use, don't try to make scene dynamic chains. Unity just really can't handle that kind of physics. You might be able to get away with it using a proxy and wrapping the chain along the proxy, but this is pretty much just for scene items. I can also animate my curve, my deformer curve, but what is happening, because this is all one shape, the any editing along that curve is going to rebuild this shape. So you might get frames where this model blinks in and out. So you can't really animate with this, but you can fill your scene with a lot of interesting geometry. And just so we're clear, this arc is my Cavetto ramp, and this is a separate model than the circle one that wraps around here. I just lined them up and use the little like link trick to make it look like they're joined. Okay, thanks for sticking through another tutorial. I hope you learned some stuff. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel. It won't be anything but Archimatix tutorials. And ring the bell if you want to be notified when the next tutorial goes live. You can also find all of these tutorials and more on community.archimatix.com. I hope to see you there. Be creative. Thanks for watching.